There's an experience many parents of highly sensitive, PDA, autistic, or otherwise neurodivergent children go through that almost no one talks about. It's not the meltdowns and it's not the arguments. It's not even the daily intensity that can come with parenting a nervous system that feels everything so deeply. It's what often happens when our child's nervous system goes into burnout. Okay, because when burnout hits, something very strange and very frightening can begin happening. Your child slowly starts doing less and less and less. One activity disappears, then another. Maybe it's going to school, maybe it's sports, maybe it's friends, maybe family gatherings start becoming too overwhelming. Maybe vacations stop. Maybe even simple things like going outside, watching a show together, or playing a board game start disappearing. And slowly, often without anyone planning it, the world gets smaller. Smaller for your child, but also smaller for you and smaller for your whole family. And as that world gets smaller, something else begins happening inside you, okay? Your fear starts growing. Fear about the future, fear about whether life will always be like this, fear about whether your child will ever re-engage with the world again. And sometimes there's a thought that many parents carry quietly that can feel almost unbearable to say out loud. What if my child never comes back into life? Okay, what if this is just how things are now? If you've ever had that thought, you're not alone. Many parents reach a point where they feel like they are trying everything to help their child and nothing seems to work. And they start feeling trapped and helpless, like the life they imagine for their child and their family is slowly disappearing. So today I want to talk about this experience, what's really happening underneath it, why the fear becomes so intense, and why this period, as painful as it is, can sometimes become a passage into something deeper for both you and your child and your whole family. Because I've lived through this myself. And I want to tell you that even though this experience can feel terrifying and painful, there can also be meaning in it. And dare I say it, even a gift. So stay with me and let's explore this together. Okay, for us, it started one summer when my son said he didn't want to go to camp. Okay, at the time, it didn't feel like a big deal. Okay, kids change their minds all the time about camp. So we said, okay, we figured maybe he just needed a break that summer. But that small moment turned out to be the beginning of something much bigger. Okay, so when school started again that year, something in my son's nervous system felt completely, or something in his nervous system completely froze. Okay. So I would try to drop him off. He couldn't go into the building. I finally get him in. I get him settled with like the occupational therapist there, but I'd have to stay for hours. And then finally I would just leave. Okay. And then every morning became this cycle of panic, meltdowns, and shutdown. And when he came home from school, he looked almost catatonic, okay? Like his whole system had collapsed under the pressure of trying to get through the day. Like he was just so gone. And eventually we made the decision to pull him out of school because it just didn't seem right for him to be coming home looking like that every day. And at the time, we thought we were just giving his nervous system some space to recover, okay? Like maybe this would be a few weeks or maybe a couple of months. But then something else started happening, okay? He stopped wanting to go out. Then he stopped wanting any friends over. Then cousins, he stopped wanting his cousins to come over because that became too overwhelming. And then family visits stopped, okay? So we stopped having all of our family members over. And then vacations stopped, okay? And then going out of the house stopped. And even simple things like watching a movie together or playing a board game as a family started disappearing. And little by little, the things that used to make up our normal life began falling away. Okay, what started as a few changes slowly turned into years. Okay, years of withdrawing, right? More than 6 years of my son withdrawing from many parts of the outside world. Okay, and during those years, there was a fear in me, right? Fear in me, my husband, there was a lot of fear. Okay, fear about whether this was temporary or whether this was how life would always be. There was grief for the loss of the things we couldn't do anymore. And there were moments when it felt like our whole life was shrinking. Okay. If something, if something similar is happening in your family right now, you probably know what that feeling is like, right? Because when your child's world starts getting smaller, something very powerful begins happening inside your nervous system. Your fear starts growing. Okay. And once that fear takes over, most parents unknowingly enter a very predictable cycle. Okay. So when a child goes into burnout, many parents, they move through this very recognizable emotional and nervous system cycle. Okay. That I want to bring to your attention here. Okay. It's a pattern I see again and again in the families and the parents I work with. And it's one that I have lived through myself and was stuck in for many years, okay, during this time of burnout for my son. And the pattern, it often looks like this or it unfolds like this, okay? Fear gets triggered, right? Your child starts doing less and less. Fear gets triggered, followed by a lot of efforting, right? You're doing a lot of efforting to figure out what to do, trying different things, okay? So lots of efforting driven by the fear, then followed by a feeling of helplessness to affect change in your child. Okay, then followed by this feeling like you're failing because anything you try to do doesn't help your child. And then shame begins to take hold, right? Feeling like you're failing as a parent. And then followed by this deep sense of grief. And this cycle tends to live on repeat over and over again. Okay. We keep going through these different aspects of this cycle over and over again, waiting for our child to change so that then we can finally feel better, right? And safer in life again. But what many parents don't realize is that this cycle isn't actually broken by your child changing. Okay. The cycle that we are in does not get you don't come out of the cycle just by your child changing, right? The way we break this cycle is to bring awareness to what is happening inside of you. So that's what this podcast is for today, okay? So let's walk through each part of this cycle so that you begin to recognize it in yourself and to really understand that this is not that something that's wrong with you, okay? This is a very understandable nervous system pattern. But when you can become aware of it, then you can begin to create the possibility of stepping out of it. Okay, so the first thing that gets triggered is fear, right? And this fear is what happens with fear is that your brain immediately jumps into future fears. Okay, so it's the future fears that start to take over and drive the system. And this makes sense, right? Because you're the parent. You feel responsible for your child's well-being and their success in life. So of course your system reacts, of course fear shows up. But it's important to understand something about the brain in moments like this, okay? And that's that we all have a brain designed to do what it does best, to ensure survival at all costs, okay? And when the brain senses a possible threat to your child's future, it does something very predictable. It starts trying to solve the future. Okay, so your mind begins scanning and searching for answers, trying to make sure your child will be okay. And as it does that, your system starts spiraling into fear, sending your mind and body into chronic stress mode and mounting an enormous stress load. Okay, the brain begins generating questions that feel urgent and impossible to ignore, right? Like, will they ever go back to school? Will they ever leave the house again? Will they ever be able to work, right? Will they ever have relationships? And eventually another question may quietly surface. Okay, one many parents carry but rarely say out loud because it feels almost unbearable to think about. Okay, what will happen to my child when I'm no longer here to help them? Okay, and that triggers a lot of fear, right? Your brain, it tries to answer these questions immediately today. It wants the answers today. But the truth is that these are questions that cannot actually be solved right now. Okay, and But the problem is that because they cannot be solved, right, then your nervous system stays activated, trying to protect your child from a future it imagines could be catastrophic. So the brain is doing exactly what it's designed to do, right? So I always tell my clients, okay, you have a brain and a body that is programmed and conditioned, and it's designed to operate a certain way, right? Your brain is designed to scan for danger and try to ensure survival. Okay, but you are not your brain or your body or your conditioning. Okay. So when fear rises in the nervous system like this, though, here's the thing it does, right? It naturally pushes us towards action, right? We want to use that fear energy. We want to do something, do something, do something. But then that fuels the stress response even more. Okay, so this leads us to the second pattern that gets activated when your child hits burnout. And that is efforting in an attempt to help or change the situation. Okay, but it's fueled by a ton of stress energy. Okay, so when your brain senses danger, especially danger to your child's future, and also danger to yourself as a parent, right? Feeling like you're going to fail your child, it will mobilize you, right? It tells you do something, anything to change this. And that mobilization shows up as efforting. Okay. So you research everything that you could find. You advocate, you search for therapies and strategies and accommodations and answers. You adjust routines, you adjust expectations, you lower demands, right? You try everything that you could think of. And this effort, it comes from love. It really does, right? But there's love there in it. But underneath that love is often the survival energy of fight, flight, right? The sympathetic nervous system in fight, flight mode. And it sends you into this urgent need to do something now mode. Okay. And why? Because sitting with the fear feels unbearable. Okay. And it's not comfortable to be in that fear on a chronic basis, right? All the time when you see your child and where your brain goes and the future fears, and then you feel this fear and then you don't want to feel the fear. So then all that energy goes into efforting and doing and trying to find solutions. Okay. So your survival system keeps repeating the same message, right? Fix this, find the answer, do something. And underneath all that effort lies a very human hope that if I try hard enough, maybe I can turn this around, right? Because that's what all of us have learned. If we try hard enough, then you can do it. If you try hard enough, you can turn it around, right? The challenge is that when the child is in deep burnout, your effort doesn't always lead to immediate change, right? At this point, it's often becomes this long-term game, okay, that we have to play, okay? And when we see that whatever we do does not help or change the situation, though, okay, and because we feel like our effort should equate, an outcome, like things should change, things should get better if we're putting so much effort into it. But when that doesn't happen, our system then drops to feeling helpless. Okay. And that's the third thing that gets triggered in this situation is helplessness, right? When nothing seems to work. So when nothing seems to change the situation, right? All your strategies, everything you've tried, even accommodations is not seeming to change the situation. We tend to cycle then into this dorsal shutdown, what's in the nervous system language, it's called the dorsal shutdown state of helplessness and powerlessness, okay? And this is a painful place to be, okay? You're trying so hard, but the strategies don't work, right? The progress doesn't come, and the constant effort begins to feel exhausting and futile. Okay, so parents can find themselves swinging between trying harder and then giving up. Trying harder, okay, I'm going to try this, I'm going to find a solution, and then just feel like, forget it, just going to give up, right? So one day you're researching, determining to find the answer, and the next day you feel so depleted and you feel like, fine, just watch YouTube all day, I don't care. Okay, have you been there? I know I have, and many of my clients have too. Okay. And it's not because you don't care, it's because you feel powerless to affect change, right? And you feel like you're in this place of like, I'm trapped and I have no choice and I am helpless and whatever I do doesn't affect change. So I'm powerless. And this situation starts feeling impossible to solve, right? And somewhere inside, a painful thought begins forming. Maybe nothing I do actually matters. Okay, I've been there. Nothing works. No matter what I do, nothing works. Okay, and this is often the moment where then helplessness begins settling into the nervous system, right? And then it's quickly followed by another painful emotion, which is shame. And this is the fourth thing that gets triggered, right? Shame, when it starts to feel like you're failing as a parent. Okay, so when nothing you try seems to work, it can begin to feel like the problem must somehow be you. You start questioning yourself in ways that can be incredibly harsh and lonely, okay? Isolating of yourself, right? Am I not trying hard enough? Am I missing something other parents would know how to do? Like, I can't tell you how many times I thought that. Like, oh, other people have it all figured out, right? But I'm missing something here. What am I doing wrong? What am I doing wrong? So sometimes the worry expands, beyond your own thoughts and into what you imagine others must be thinking of you. Okay, so then you start wondering what the doctors you're working with, or the therapists, or the teachers, or the neighbors, even, or the family members, right, or other parents, what they must be thinking about your child's life and then about your parenting, right? Why can't they get their child to go to school? Like, they don't understand, right? Why can't they get their child to function, right? They don't get it. They look at it as like it's the parents, it's the parents' fault. Must be the parents' fault. We always get blamed for it all. And slowly, those imagined judgments, okay, they begin turning inward, right? And you feel like if my child can't function, then maybe I'm not a good enough parent. And maybe other parents would know how to fix this, and maybe I'm failing. Okay, and this is one of the most painful parts of this experience because it touches something very deep in many of us. Okay, this belief that our worth as parents is measured by how well our children fit into the world. Okay, so just take that in for a moment because that is a deeply wedged belief in all of us, right? That our worthiness as a parent, us being a good enough parent, right, is measured by how well our child fits in to this neuronormative world that we live in. Okay. So if our child is thriving according to society's standards, then we feel successful. But if we're struggling to function inside those systems, if our child is struggling to function inside those systems, and hence we are too, we begin to feel like we've somehow failed. Okay. And yet the truth is this: your child's nervous system challenges are not a reflection of your worth as a parent. Okay. So I invite you to really take that in. Your child's nervous system challenges are not a reflection of your worth as a parent. Okay. In fact, the very fact that you are still here, still searching, still learning, still trying to understand how to support your child, even when it feels incredibly hard, speaks to something much deeper than failure. Okay. It speaks to deep love. It speaks to perseverance that you have in you, and it speaks to not giving up on your child. And at the same time, when shame enters the room, right, when you feel like you're failing, it often keeps your nervous system cycling between states. Okay, you may find yourself moving between that sympathetic fight, flight, do something now state, and then that dorsal shutdown of I'm failing, nothing I do matters, right? I'm a bad parent. Okay, and once shame becomes a dominant part of this season that you're in, it often brings another emotion with it, which is grief. So that's the fifth thing that is triggered in this pattern loop, okay, that happens when a child goes into burnout, right? Grief for the life that feels lost, right? There is real grief in this experience. Okay, grief for the life you imagined for your child, grief for the life that you for the family life, right? For the family life that you thought you would be living. Okay, grief for the activities, the relationships and experiences that now feel out of reach. Okay, and sometimes it can feel like the world is continuing to move forward for everyone else while your family is stuck in a life that has become smaller and smaller. Okay, you can love your child exactly as they are and still grieve the life that you thought they or you might have, right? So both of those things can exist at the same time. And allowing that grief is not giving up, okay? It is part of this passage that you're in. Because underneath the fear, the efforting, the helplessness, the shame, and the grief, something deeper is often being revealed here. Okay. And that revelation has less to do with your child, okay, and more to do with the systems and expectations that we were all raised inside. Okay, so let's get into that next, right? Because this is about a system that doesn't fit for our child or for us anymore. Okay. And the system starts to break down, right? Starting with our child and us. So when parents end up chronically cycling, right? We're chronically cycling, we're in this pattern, right? Our kids are in burnout, we're in this pattern, cycling through fear, efforting, helplessness, shame, grief, right? And then it can feel like everything is falling apart. But sometimes what is actually breaking down is something much older. Okay. It's the belief system that we were raised in. Okay. We have these structures and systems we were raised in, and we inherited those and we took them on kind of blindly, right? Through osmosis. And like, this is the way that you live a successful life, right? So we were raised inside this belief system. Most of us grew up with very specific understanding of what success looks like, right? What being a successful human looks like. And that is children go to school, they work hard, they develop skills, they become independent and responsible, they contribute to society. And underneath those expectations were deeper messages that many of us absorbed growing up. Okay. And this is productivity equals worth. Efficiency equals intelligence. Hard work equals success. Okay. And then push through obstacles, right? You got to push. You got to push. Solve problems. Control outcomes. Okay. Many of us manage to live successfully in those systems ourselves, right? Although some of us have probably hit some degree of burnout too from those systems, right? But our children's nervous system cannot thrive in those systems, okay? They do not function well in these systems. And when they can't, it feels like the child or family must be failing. But sometimes the truth is something entirely different, right? Something else entirely. Sometimes the system itself, okay, the flawed system, in my opinion, is what is being revealed. Okay, so over the years, of supporting my son through the burnout, right? And us all slowing down as a family, I slowly began realizing that something deeper was happening here. It wasn't just my son struggling, it was the way that we define success and productivity and functioning in our culture, that this may not actually work for many nervous systems after all, right? Like you see the mental health struggles of today and how many people are struggling inside these structure and systems that were created for the past, few hundreds of years. Okay, so and recently this has solidified it more. I came across something written by neurodivergent clinician Dr. Gatika Pillai. Okay, and she captured this realization beautifully. Okay, and you may know her as Neurospicy on Instagram. So she posed a simple but powerful question. Okay, instead of asking, how do we make people more efficient? Right? This is what we grew up in. How do we make people more efficient? How do we make them push hard and do more, do more, do more? Think about how much we live every day about trying to get more and more stuff done, right? And then when we don't feel good about ourselves. And when we do, we feel good about ourselves. So think about this, okay? So instead of asking, how do we make people more efficient? What if we asked this question instead, which is, what if the definition was too small, right? What if the definition was too small? Okay, so just hang with me here for a minute because that question resonated deeply for me. Okay, because when you step back and really look at the systems we live inside, right? The schools, the workplaces, even many parenting frameworks, they tend to reward one particular type of nervous system. Okay, and this is where the small definition comes in, right? Because these systems are designed to reward one type of nervous system, the one that has steady energy, okay, predictable regulation, right? Predictable regulation, emotional regulation, knows how to behave, can comply, all of that, right? Has consistent productivity, okay, has linear progress, okay? So just think about that for a minute, right? This is what our systems were designed for. Humans who could have that. Steady energy, predictable regulation, consistent productivity, linear progress. But human nervous systems are far more diverse than those systems were designed for. And this is what's showing up in society today, right? And in many ways, our children are revealing where those systems are too narrow. Okay, so this is where it's the system perhaps that's failing and not us. Okay. So, one of the things that many families eventually discover during this burnout journey that they're on with their child is that the old way of living wasn't actually working for anyone, right? Like, I know I went into burnout because of this journey. I know many parents who go into burnout and you start to question everything, right? So, this old way of living wasn't working for anyone to begin with. Like, that's the realization that comes through, okay? Not just for the child, but actually for the entire family. Okay, so many of us were raised in generations where nervous system health was not understood, right? There was no trauma informed, there was no neuroscience informed, right? Stress was just normalized, pushing through exhaustion was normalized, suppressing all of your emotions was normalized. Like, and that was deemed as what was the successful human. Okay, but success often meant, in that definition, success meant overriding your body again and again. Okay, and this has been done for hundreds of years, and now why do we have children like this? Right? They're showing us that that wasn't the way. Okay, but in our children's nervous system cannot live that way, right? So they are mirroring to us like a very, very true reality of what hundreds of years of conditioning and programming of this way of being has done to family systems and the human race, I feel like, okay? So in many ways, this is revealing something important about the path of humanity, right? And burnout can become a moment, right, or a period where families begin rebuilding something that was never really built in generations past. Okay, so this is the opportunity. This is where the gain comes in and the bigger picture comes in, right? We have this opportunity now to build this foundation of nervous system safety that was never built before, right? And when we build that foundation, right, learning how to regulate, learning how to co-regulate, learning how to prioritize connection and full acceptance of who one is, right? And support instead of pressure and performance, right? Then that rebuilding work changes everything, right? For your family, for your child, for future generations ahead. So during those years when my son withdrew from so much of the world, okay, there were many times when it felt like our life was breaking down, right? I felt like I was breaking down. I felt like I was losing myself. Okay, so life felt like it was breaking down, right? And that's where you may be right now. And in many ways it was, right? But what was breaking down? It was all of the expectations we had, the meanings that we had inherited, okay, the conditioning we had been living from. All of those things are what started to crack, okay, because the foundation was built on that. So it feels like you're cracking, but it's really this programming and conditioning foundation that's cracking, okay? And slowly we began to realize something else. Our son wasn't the only one being asked to slow down. Our entire family was, right? Because this is what often needs to happen. Everyone needs to slow down, right? We were invited to look inward, to question the beliefs and inherited patterns that we had been living from, to rebuild our own nervous systems from something deeper and more aligned with our truth, not the world's version of it. Okay, so looking back now, those years felt like a cocoon, right? We were cocooning. And from the outside, it looked like life had stopped. It even looked like life may have been failing for us, for many people from the outside. But inside, something profound was happening, okay? Old structures were dissolving, and something new and more stable was forming. So today, our life still doesn't look like what most people would call normal. And to most conditioned people, right, the way we see success in life, they wouldn't even say that we're successful. But we are so, so, so much happier, so much happier. Okay. My son still doesn't go to school, but he wants to learn again. He's curious. Okay. He's slowly working through fears about being in the world again. So we're still going through it to some degree. Okay. But that movement that he's making forward is coming from his true motivation and more from nervous system regulation and not from our fear or pushing him to override his system. Okay. And the biggest shift for us was this: we moved from fear to trust, trusting in the journey, trusting in the path, right? We trust our son. We trust his nervous system. We trust that development does not have to follow society's timelines. That's a huge one. Okay. We trust that his life can become meaningful in ways that are true to who he is, right? Not how society deems a successful human should be, right? We are just following his truth and trusting in his truth, whatever that may be. Okay. And that trust has brought a kind of freedom to our family. Okay. Freedom to define success differently, freedom to build a life rooted in connection, safety, love, and authenticity. Okay. So there is a hidden gain in all of this. Okay. And you may not be there right now. If you are in the thick of it right now, where your child's world is getting smaller and your fear is growing, I want you to know that your pain makes sense, okay? Your nervous system is trying to protect your child and their future. But sometimes what looks like collapse and failing and breakdown is also a passage, okay? A passage that invites you to slow down too, okay? And to question the conditioning that you inherited, all those belief systems that you inherited, and to rebuild your life from something deeper that is more aligned with your true values and your authenticity, not from who the world told you to be. Okay, what your survival brain interprets as loss right now may also hold a profound gain for you that you're just not seeing yet, but will see if you stick with it and stay open and work with your conditioning. Okay. And that gain is not only for your child, right? It's for you, it's for your family, and perhaps even for the larger shift that our children are helping guide us toward, right? Sometimes this chapter of parenting that feels the most frightening becomes the one that ultimately leads us to the greatest freedom, okay? Freedom for ourselves, our children, and the lives that we are learning to build together. So if this spoke to you, Please comment, please share with others. I'm sure other parents need to hear this messaging too. And thank you for being here today.